Yo, what up? Welcome to the I Am Him podcast. I'm De Andre Official, and we're about to continue into the conversation on silent rage. So, one of the reasons why I feel like we have silent rage is because even in media, we don't have platforms and spaces for men to be vulnerable, especially black men. When I think about movies and stuff, the white man typically was the superheroes, right? We typically saw white men as superheroes growing up, and then beyond them being superheroes, we see them as the providers and the protectors of their family. Mm-hmm. Then when we think about black cinema, some of the movies I grew up on, Boys in the Hood and stuff like that, the first thing you notice is that we're targeted by our own community.
Correct.
And then outside of being targeted by our own community, then we're targeted by the police system and the judicial system. Mm-hmm. So then it turns into, who do you scream to? When you hurt, when you down, when you enraged, who do you scream to? I also feel like we have a silent expectation from the women in our community to become something that we ain't never seen before. And I had no wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a demand to be responsible, but it feels more like we're being asked to be successful, but expected to fail. Because the response to us being unsuccessful shows that you kind of expected us to fail. It's almost like confirmation bias. When we're unsuccessful, it's like they're being confirmed of like, that's what we thought of you in the first place, So I can't really scream in front of the world, because then if I do get arrested or shot by the police, it's like, you deserve that. Look at how you act. Look at your attitude. Look at how you were. You were an angry black man. You deserve that.
Why didn't you just comply?
Yeah, why you didn't just comply? I can't. And then there are some women that allow us to be vulnerable, but the majority of the women that come from our community, it feels like they're not allowing us to be vulnerable either. So we can't really scream at them. You know what I mean? Because then on the back end, you still want to protect them.
Right.
You know what I mean? You still want to look at it as the head to them too. So I think it's silent because we don't know who to scream to. Who do we scream to?
And I think one of the most important aspects to consider is when we are in the home, how do we maintain that balance of being that leader, being that provider, being the example? Because I think a lot of times what's expected of us is we do go out, we work the jobs, we do all of the things, and then we're leaving this role, so to speak, on the women to be the nurturer, the caretaker, and all the things, where we're supposed to embody some of those responsibilities too, but we push all of it off on them because I have to go work a 40-plus hour a week, 50-plus hour a week, 60-hour a week job just to sustain my family, make sure the roof is over their head, make sure they got the benefits so that they can go to the doctor, like all these different things. So we understand what our responsibility is, but if we're not careful in the way that we conduct ourselves, we can lose all of that ability to provide. It gets snatched away from us because now we're put in a system or in a situation where we can't lead or have any form of success, because now if we mismanage what we're supposed to do, and oftentimes we don't think of it in that way.
Right.
We're not careful of how we control our emotions, how we speak, the words we say, whether we're saying it to the woman in our life, to the children in our life, to even our friends. Sometimes we just have random conversations, and when we're having our conversations, just because we have that overwhelming feeling going in, and we think that we're not really being heard or understood in the proper way, we lash out against our friend because we're thinking they don't understand us. When if you just give the opportunity to express, let it out, let them hear where you're coming from, what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with issues on the job, how that is impacting you to where when you come home, you don't feel as though you can come home and relax and open up and be vulnerable, right? Or if you're having a good time on the job, but then when you come home, now you're feeling like you're dealing with a whole different aspect.
It's a whole different animal when you get home.
And it's like, so how do I handle this in the way that I'm supposed to? And there's no rule book, there's no plan that shows you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. You're literally learning as you go. And so I think a lot of times when we have the responsibility of being either a partner, being a parent, if we have leadership roles in different areas of community, if we're talking about like the church, or if we're on our children's sports teams or things like that, we have all of these additional layers to us. We're not just, in my case, I'm not just Maurice. I'm Maurice, the administrative specialist. I'm Maurice, the student. I'm Maurice, the father. I'm Maurice, the brother. I'm Maurice, the uncle. I'm all of these different things, right? And so then I know that I have a responsibility that I'm supposed to lean into in all of those different roles. But then sometimes it feels like I'm either not really able to fully just let it out and just be, who I am. I have to operate within a certain capacity related to the specific role. So I'm putting a different hat on each time that I go and teach. And that gets tiring. It's like, I just want to be Maurice. I don't want to be all of these different factions. I just want to be him. And it's like, it's hard to do that if you're not necessarily partnered up with the right person that can understand you like that, or having the right friends to be able to hear that and say, hey, I've heard that before, or I've had that experience, or maybe I've never had that experience, but can you explain more? So I think a lot of times that silent rage is like, it's just built up, and then you're like, I don't know how to let that out, but I also don't know necessarily who I'm supposed to turn to. Yeah.
And I definitely understand, the compartmentalizing the different hats and the different roles. On top of, especially the father role, especially if you didn't have one. To me, that's the hardest role. When I come home from work, I'm almost immediately like, okay, all the nurturing and the caretaking, it stops now because Dad's home. I'm gonna be disciplined. You know what I mean? Because I'm tired and I don't really have a lot of time before this and bedtime, so I'm going straight to discipline. For the rest of the night. All the other stuff has stopped. And then sometimes, but I always try to catch myself because I don't want to be disconnected affectionately from my kids,
right?
Or disconnected emotionally from my kids. But most days throughout the week, I feel like I have to go straight into disciplined dad mode because I know I got 2 boys and a girl. Okay. I know that my wife hasn't been able to discipline them the way that they need to be disciplined while I've been gone.
Right.
And I didn't grow up with a father. So with the father and son, and you didn't mention son, but I know that's a role that all men are playing, right? What kind of son are you? I grew up as a son without a father. So when I'm talking to my mom as a son, I feel like I have a different responsibility there too. I gotta become something that my dad wasn't in her eyes also. And then I gotta become something that my dad wasn't in my wife's eyes and in my kids' eyes also, So I think on top of wearing the roles, if you don't have, like you said, not having a playbook, not having an example to go by, or somebody to really encourage you, as you're falling down, it becomes hard. It becomes hard.
I know from my experience, I was raised by my father. My mother wasn't in the home.
Oh, wow.
And so most people, when they hear my story, they're like, that's so awkward because it's not the norm, right? My dad raised me and my oldest brother. And so when my parents got divorced, they got divorced before I turned 2. So I don't have any recollection of actually being in the home with her. I've always been with my dad. And so the example that I saw from him, he assumed my oldest brother by marriage. That's not his biological son, but you would never know the difference. Because when you see all of us together, you've always seen Cameron with my dad. And so now that we've all grown up and we know all of the things associated with, the marriage just didn't work and so forth and so on, it's like, yes, I have the relationship with my mom, but I didn't live in the house with my mom. I wasn't reared by my mom. She had an impact and a part to play in my life, but it wasn't a constant. Whereas my little brother and little sister got to have the experience that I didn't have. And so even with that dynamic, being kind of brought into a blended family on my mother's side, she remarried, had my little brother and little sister, and then now I had a big brother that came in from that marriage. So now I'm the middle child. And so all of the things that people tend to make fun of, the middle child for, characteristics and so forth, I do typically embody, but it's like I have this older brother who, that's like the hero, right? then I have this new big brother that I'm learning, who I realize has so many aspects, so many layers to him in terms of like affection and frustration, disappointment, all these different things. But anytime that I'm in his company, I'm getting the affection from him, right? Because he's seeing how close we are, and he's just, just delivering that. And so then now I have my little brother and little sister, to where I'm trying to make sure I'm the proper example for them, like what I saw from my bigger brothers. And so for me, seeing how my dad was in our home with my oldest brother, it's like, okay, I understand the responsibility. I understand what is supposed to be done. And so by the time I turned 16 years old, I found myself in a similar situation, even though I wasn't even married to the person I was with. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I assumed a child at 16 years old that I wasn't required to assume responsibility for, but I understood what that love looked like because of the example my dad set forth with my brother.
So, yeah, man, earlier when I talked about, coming home and having that short amount of time and then having to discipline the kids, I literally, some days, as soon as I walk to the door, so me and my wife, we transfer jobs, from home to work.
Okay.
When I come home from work, for about 20 to 30 minutes, she's at home, she go to work.
Oh, okay.
She's gone. She's part-time right now, so she's gone for the next couple hours. It's just me and the kids. Mm-hmm. And when she comes back home, there's about an hour or so left, or they're close to going to bed.
Mm-hmm.
I anticipate that time to just be with her for that moment, but in between that time, it's like I don't have anything. Like my emotions literally, a lot of times when I come home from work, my emotions literally drop when I walk through the door, because I know what I'm about to walk into. And I love my kids.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But as soon as, especially my boys, and I see them running around in the front, I'm like, I know I gotta turn all this around. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I know I might have to rectify everything that happens, especially if there's a mess in the house. Like I know I'm gonna have to rectify all that, and so, early in our marriage, me and my wife used to bump heads over like what's being taken care of when I'm gone, and what's being taken care of when she's gone. And then work schedules change a lot, So that's the current one that we're in right now. And I have 2 kids with special needs. So my oldest daughter has autism, my middle son has autism, and then my youngest son doesn't. But my middle son, he's moderate on the spectrum, so he's more severe than my daughter. I can hold a conversation with my daughter, can't hold a conversation with my son. He says words here and there. So I'm coming home, seeing that they have needs, but they can't communicate to me. They can't tell me what they want, So I fight through all that, and I've had many nights where I've sat, and asked God, like, well, why would you give me a child with special needs? Like, why would you put me in this position to have him, and to have to go through that? I love the idea of having kids. I wanted to be married. I wanted a family all my life.
Of course.
But you can't count that. You know what I mean? You can't anticipate that.
No.
Right? So yeah, man, that's a rough stretch for me, and then I can't necessarily scream that to my wife because she's the only other partner in the house. You know what I mean? So how do I come and tell her I had to be dad today and that hurt me? You know what I mean? I just formulated those words just now, but I've never thought of even formulating it in that sentence. You know what I mean? In that way. So because my emotions drop a lot of times when I first come home, I'm already less patient. You know what I mean? And then by the end of the night, I have to reflect on the actions that I took where I was being less patient.
Yeah.
And then that hurts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here thinking about the time where I'm like, yeah, my son couldn't talk. And then I have to decipher between when he's doing something wrong and I feel like he knows what he's doing and when he don't know what he's doing. I don't always know when he knows and when he don't know. He's 5 and he can barely talk. He got words here and there and I don't always know. So that's rough for me too. You know what I mean? Always trying to decipher that part, and then trying to figure out if was I really being patient at this point? Was I being passive at this point? Was I disciplining too hard at this point? Was I being too harsh right here? You know? And then I hate it for my daughter because sometimes she just catches strays. You know?
Yeah.
I'm dealing with the boys. She'll come and ask me a question like, you're right in the middle of that? And I'm like, no, not right now, go to your room. You know what I mean? I'm like, dang, like, ew, that wasn't at you. I had to come and apologize to her a lot of nights. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry for yelling at you. It wasn't about you. You know what I mean? Like, you ended up catching the stray. So yeah, man, that's a plight that I have to go through like often. And then once again, back to the original topic, it becomes a silent rage because I don't know who to scream to about that. You know?
Welcome back to the I Am Him podcast. My name is Maurice Bowers, and as we've been talking about, silent rage as Black men. So one of the things that I've come to realize in my development is that with my mom not being in the home, I had to pay attention to how both my parents, function, like how I got them when I had time with my dad versus when I had time with my mom. And so when I had time with my dad, I'm always with him. I live with him, right? But when I had the time with my mom, the time with her was I was in space with her, but I wasn't with her.
Like with her, right.
And so
right.
I had the experience of when they were able to work out their differences after the divorce. When I did come into space with her, the experience that I always had was she's away in another room. I'm either with my stepbrother, or now I have this little brother, little sister, so she's tending to them, and I'm that additional body in the room. So I'm trying to be, the big brother that's trying to help, because I know if I help, then I should be able to get some engagement, right?
Yeah.
And so my little brother and I were almost 5 years apart, and my sister and I are almost 6 years apart. So whenever I would come, I always knew I'm coming into this space as an additional. I'm not coming in this space as part of. So everything that I always did when I came into that household, I knew this is a new side of my family that I'm receiving. This man that's with my mom, while they weren't married at the time, I knew that he had this responsibility that he played in the household as being the leader. He went to work, he took care of the household. She was a homemaker. So he went to work, she stayed at home with kids. So whenever I'm going over there, even though he's not my dad, I know he is a dad, right? So he's always been, my stepdad in that capacity up until when they got married, and then, it's official now, right? And so for me, not having my mom in the home, I did always find myself like watching a lot of like programs coming up, like Family Matters and Fresh Prince and all these different dynamics where you see all of these families that does have a mom in the home. And then when the program would go off, it would just kind of put me in a space to kind of like imagine what that would be like to have in the house, because I never got to have that. My oldest brother got to experience it for a few years. I never got to experience it. And now here, my little brother and little sister are getting this experience along with my stepbrother. And so I still don't know what that looks like for them, right? And so they got to grow up their entire lives. My little brother and little sister got to grow up their entire lives with my mom. Again, I was this additional factor. And so while I don't harbor resentment in that respect, because obviously the marriage just didn't work, I can't insert myself into a space that wasn't me, you know what I mean? Like, I came as a product of that relationship, but that wasn't my relationship, right? That was theirs. But because of that dynamic severing the way that it did, and them not figuring out how to best make it a nurturing atmosphere, my mom wasn't really nurturing. Not saying that she didn't care or didn't love, but the nurturing wasn't there. And so for me, when I was little, every time that I would see my aunt, which is her sister, I always got the nurturing from her, and my brain immediately equated, this is mom. And so I was calling her that for a brief period until, you know, they both were like, I'm really your aunt, this is your mom. And, you know, like, and I'm like...
Did you call her mom?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Because she understood.
She understood.
She understood. And so it was like one of those things to where it was like, I said it for a while, and I know it got under my mom's skin, but then at the same time, I think my mom also understood, even though she couldn't get that out and express it that way. Mm-hmm. And so when they finally did have that conversation to make it clear, this is your aunt, this is your mom, that was literally right before my little brother and little sister came into the picture.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, like I'm developing and trying to have this understanding, and I'm just like, huh, okay. So like growing up, I've always been like my auntie's baby. Like my oldest brother was Grand's baby, and then the last three of us were auntie's baby. So because my aunt just had that natural instinct, she should have been a mother, even though that was not her desire. She really should have been a mom, where my mom should have been the fun aunt. Because by nature, she's fun and all of the things, but she's not a nurturer at her core. And that's not to fault her, that's just not who she is, right? Mm-hmm. So it had an impact on me because all of the things that I was looking for in terms of nurturing, I was constantly trying to like pull it out of my dad. And so, you know, the affection, you know, just trying to be up against him, like, you know, skin to skin, you know, just like being close. And he's just like, man, move. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just like, or if I'm
supposed to,
right.
Who am I supposed to go to for this?
Or if I'm just feeling in that moment, like just having the ability to just say, I love you, without it just kind of being looked at funny as like, why are you constantly saying that? Because that's what I'm seeing in these programs where they're able to have that exchange, and that wasn't a constant in the home. And so it wasn't until the older that I got that I think my dad started to realize that it's like, okay, he's doing this, obviously that's a need. So then he started to match, but it took a while for him to get to that place where he started to soften up and to be able to lean into affection. Because for him, the example he saw from his dad, he grew up in a household with both mom and dad. Mm-hmm. So now he has a household of his own that's not the same way that he was modeled and raised up in. So he's not thinking in the way of, well, this is what my experience has been, how is this impacting my son? He's just trying to, you know, operate and do what he can to raise me. And so all of the things that I saw from my dad was working 2 full-time jobs. I'm going to school. I'm a latchkey kid. I'm all of these things, and I'm, you know, finding myself getting involved in my church activities, doing this, doing that. I'm doing all these things just to, you know, keep myself occupied and belong. Mm-hmm. Because I know with him being this person that's working these 2 jobs, full-time jobs, and is overwhelmed, overworked, the only time that he has a day off is literally Saturday, because he goes to one job Sunday night through Thursday night, getting off that next morning. And then he gets about maybe 2-3 hours of sleep before he has to go to the next job and be there all day to then again get a couple hours of a nap to then go back to the other job. Ooh. So I didn't really have, by that time I was like 12 or 13 years old, I didn't have him anymore at all in the home. Whereas when I started going into elementary school, he just was working his regular job at night. He was always at home during the day. So when I got home from school, he's up, you know, watching, you know, the news, and I'm doing homework, and, you know, he's, you know, helping with homework and stuff. But then by the time that I got to the middle school age and he took on that second job, if we were doing anything, it was on Saturday. And again, that's the only one day that I can get of him. And this is also that one day that this is where he's supposed to be able to decompress.
Right.
So, you know, he's now trying to juggle all of this. He wants to be able to just breathe. I need all of this of him. Yeah. And he can only give so much. And so I realized in that moment that, you know, the older I got, I started taking I got to the place where I got my own job at 14. Because I'm like, well, he's working, and because he's working so hard, I don't want him to feel like he has to do all of this to try to help me. I'll just get my own money, so now I don't have to ask him for all this, that, and the third. So that's, the person that I've been working since 14. I'm 37 now. 14, then again, I assumed this child is 16. So now I'm like, okay, the responsibility that I took on by working, earning this money just so I can put it in my pocket, it's not even about me anymore. It's about this baby, what this baby needs. So me talking to mom, hey, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? What's going on with the baby? Here, give me the baby. You go take some time for you. You go, have a nice bath, go lay down, do whatever. I got him for the rest of the evening until it's like 11 o'clock midnight. Now I got to give him back because now I got to go home and do homework and do everything that I need to do so I can be in school the next day, do those hours, go work for a couple hours afterwards. And then when it's, my time to come back over, as soon as I walk in the door, where's my son? So having that, experience for me, it's like what I didn't get from my mom, I was always trying to pour into the experience that I had with my son. Mm-hmm. So that because his biological father chose not to be in space, he didn't deserve to be without a parent, because I knew what that was like to not have my parent in home. So I'm like, no, he's not going to have that experience. I'm going to stand in the gap. And so now he's 21 years old, and the type of affectionate person that I was, constantly trying to, be up, brush his shoulders, skin to skin, we'll go to church, and he's trying to be, the young man that he is, but then he starts to relax and soften up, and now he's all on me, and I don't even say a word. I just look, and I just let it be, because I know he needs that.
You need it.
Just as much as I need it too, because I want him to know that I'm here for him, but I knew he needed it more. He just couldn't get it out of his words. It was the expression that was important. So for me, it's just one of those things where I recognize how important presence is, intentionality is, love is, because when you don't have that, you're going to long for it in such a heavy way.
Yeah.
And welcome back, everybody, to the I Am Him podcast. We just wanted to wrap things up and tell you thank you for joining us today. We'll be seeing you guys real soon on our next journey, and stay safe. Love you guys.